What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the FantasyPros Dynasty Football Podcast presented by Reality Sports Online. My name is Kyle Yates, and I am your host, and I am joined, as always, by Ray Garvin, also known as Ray GQ on Twitter. Ray, let's talk about this, man. We're gonna have some dad talk here from time to time. Daylight savings time. Why is it the worst thing in the world as a parent of a young child?
Man, it's Daddy, it's not dark outside. Why am I going to bed? And as we're recording, I'm watching the baby monitor, and both of my kids are in the room playing right now. So normally a week ago they were in the bed sleep, but time skipped ahead. It's light outside. It's really like 6:30 in their mind. So yeah, man, this is dad life, baby.
Yeah, and if you're watching on YouTube and you see Ray just get up and walk out for a minute or two and then come back in, you know why. He's going to check on the kids, right? That's a dad life here. And, of course, you can be watching us over on YouTube at youtube.com/fantasypros. All right, Ray, the purpose of tonight's show is we're recording this Monday night, right? So free agency, the legal tampering period, however we want to classify it, free agency, whatever, it's happening, right? It's happening as we speak. It's been a crazy day with a lot of movement already. So we wanted to record here tonight and just kind of catch the stuff that's fallen, right? Catch the stuff that's falling already, and let's talk about it from a dynasty perspective. So this is really going to be a super informal discussion. I've got news items here that we're just going to walk through, of course, brought to us by the news desk here at Fantasy Pros that has done just a phenomenal job today. They have been crushing it. So if you are missing out on all this news, make sure that you download our Fantasy News app by going to your Google Play Store or Apple App Store. Again, make sure that you download this and get this into your hands because our news desk has just been crushing it. So we're going to talk through some of that, and then if we've got time, I don't really know how long this is going to take. If we've got time, we're going to talk about something here at the end. I'll just leave it at that, kind of open-ended. If we don't get to it, then we can get to it on another episode, but it's a really good discussion, so hopefully we can get to it today. All right, sound good?
Yeah, man, let's get it.
All right, so since we last recorded, a few things have happened, and we are just going to go down the list in chronological order, because if I did it any other way, I would guaranteed miss something. So here we go. Cam Newton signs a one-year deal again with the New England Patriots. He's going to stay in Foxborough next season. So Cam Newton here, 1 year, up to $14 million deal. So I guess the question I'll just ask you, Ray, right away is, does this mean that Cam Newton is the locked-in starter for the New England Patriots next season?
Unless they draft somebody at 15, which I do think that is on the table, I think he's locked in as the starter for the entire 2021 season, yes.
Okay, so I agree with you that I think the draft is really the only other place that they'll be looking here, right? I don't think that they're going to bring in anyone else in free agency, right? Like looking at the guys that are available, I don't see them going after Andy Dalton after giving Cam Newton $15 or $14 million. So I guess now let's turn it and say, okay, if Cam Newton is the starting quarterback next season, and there are a few moves here that we'll talk about and break down in just a little bit. I don't want to get to those quite yet, but what does it do for Cam Newton dynasty-wise moving forward? Now, it's a one-year deal, so it's still kind of a prove it. Again, it's not super like top-tier starting money either based on the season that he had. So next season, just dynasty outlook for Cam Newton. What are your instant reactions here when you heard this news?
Instant reaction was those individuals who had or held on to Cam Newton on their dynasty teams from the final part of last season into this offseason. Kudos to you, because you have a starting quarterback on your roster that you don't have to like scrap and find, right? But dynasty-wise, I mean, he's still outside the top 20, probably outside my top 25. And with this influx of rookies that are coming in, it does nothing. Like I don't want him. He's 32, 33?
31, 32, yeah.
Yeah, his body is probably older than that. His arm looks worse than that. So if you have Cam Newton, rejoice, because you do have a starting quarterback that has upside. But I wouldn't be doing anything crazy to acquire him, and I wouldn't be using any significant draft capital in a dynasty startup to get him either.
Yeah, if I can get him as a depth quarterback, right, as specifically speaking to a startup, if I can get him as my QB3, which I think you can, based on ADP right now, I think that's kind of the situation that I'm willing to roster him. Now, if I have to rely on him as anything more than that in a Superflex league particularly, not going to be super happy because you mentioned it. what happens if they roll into the NFL draft and I doubt it happening, or I can't see it happening, but a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance falls to them at 15 or even to, 11 and they trade up or something like that. Like at that point, Cam becomes irrelevant. So I do think that he's got an excellent chance to be the starter next season, but I'm not going to put all my chips in that basket, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. I'm with you on that one. That's why I said if you have him, if you acquired him last year and then you have him this year, good for you. But Yates, I was looking through his stats because I was talking with some people earlier, and they were like, man, he had a great start to last season. And I was looking through his stats, and he really didn't. He had one massive game where he had 397 passing yards versus the Seahawks, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And then outside of that, I mean, I think he had like a couple of games under 100 passing yards. Like, I just, and I get it. He didn't have any weapons, but Cam he's not the same super Cam that we came to know and love.
Yeah, passing is not how he's going to provide value for you from a fantasy football perspective. It's going to be his rushing ability. So, and again, we've got some things that we'll break down from the New England Patriots more that we'll talk about Cam Newton and just kind of cap that conversation. Here's the one that I want to spend significant time on. Aaron Jones re-signs with the Green Bay Packers. I did not see this coming. I thought that he was as good as gone. A 4-year, $48 million deal here for Aaron Jones to remain in Green Bay for a team that was already pretty cap-strapped. So I saw you put out a tweet, and it got crazy engagement. I think last I checked, it was up to like 2.5 thousand likes, which is awesome. Yeah. And I wanted to talk to you about that because I feel like you and I are going to be in lockstep here. Aaron Jones, let's just break this down. Let's go in depth. Let's talk about this. What are your feelings on this situation? Because I've got my own.
I mean, wheels up, Aaron Jones. In our last episode, we did the Dynasty startup. I believe you took Aaron Jones. He was your second or third pick in that draft?
Yeah, I think I got him at the 202.
Yeah, the 202. And some people thought you were crazy at that point in time, but you look like you could see the future, Yates. I believe you had some insider information, which is not cool when we're doing a mock draft. But, I mean, there's the stability that we were looking for. Now you've got a locked and loaded high-end fantasy asset. I mean, literally, he's got top 3 running back appeal in that offense with Aaron Rodgers, with Devonte Adams. Aaron Jones, wheels absolutely up for the young running back. He's secured. He's the starting running back for the foreseeable future. And good for those individuals who held on to him or those that went out and acquired him, based on his potential to leave Green Bay. Hell of a job.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about Aaron Jones' dynasty value, because I think for me, I'm a little bit lower, I think, than where you're at, because my appeal with Aaron Jones and drafting him where I did was, and over some of the guys that I did, was the fact that he was rumored to go to Miami, right? And at that point, they were going to give him this type of contract, and he was going to end up being the sole guy in that backfield or whatever. Now, staying in Green Bay, it's been a situation where we know that they love to deploy a committee. So I still think Aaron Jones is a top 10 dynasty running back. I'm not pushing him way far outside of that or anything like that. But yet I do think that top 3 appeal, I don't know if I'm there yet, because my concern all hinges now on A.J. Dillon. What's the plan? What's the master plan here for rostering Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon? Because I've had a lot of people that have interacted with me on Twitter and said, like, well, A.J. Dillon is going to step right into that Jamal Williams role. And I'm like, but no, he's not, because he doesn't fill that same skill set. Jamal Williams was a pass catcher. He was someone that you could utilize and give those, change of pace receptions to, and it took work away from Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon is not a pass catcher. He's someone that you give the ball 18 plus times to on the ground and wear down the defense. So this just all goes back to, I don't know what Green Bay was doing drafting A.J. Dillon in the second round last year. And now I'm so confused, because I'm going, okay, well, if it was a situation where you could you could phrase it and view it in the light of, we were thinking ahead and we were looking that Aaron Jones was going to leave in free agency next year. We weren't going to be able to afford him, this, and we sacrificed some other needs that we had, because, wide receiver was a huge need for Green Bay last year, like it still is. Interior defensive line was a huge need, it still is, and linebacker was a huge need, and it still is. And they drafted A.J. Dillon in the second round, and I don't know where you stood on this, Ray. I thought that was a huge reach for A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon in the 4th round, I could have gotten on board with, but not in the back of the 2nd, especially with the way, looking at the roster that they had and Aaron Jones being on that roster, saying you have a talented running back already. Why not just give him the majority of the workload?
Yeah.
So anyway, to double back to breaking news, Jameis Winston reached an agreement on a 1-year deal worth up to $12 million with the Saints. Awesome. We'll break that down in a little bit. Okay, so to double back to Aaron Jones's dynasty value long term, like I'm just confused. Like I really am, because I don't know you don't draft a running back in the 2nd round and then just completely not use him. So is A.J. Dillon now going to come in on the goal line and take away those goal line carries? Is he, I don't know. How do you see this? Do you have any of those concerns? What are your thoughts here with what I just rambled on about Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon specifically?
Well, I think the appeal with Aaron Jones is how efficient he was. If you look at his 2019 stat line, I mean, he wasn't a 300 carry guy. He didn't get 50 receptions, but he was extremely efficient on that offense. Right. And there were times last season where I know that just like myself, you and the people listening, we'd be watching the Green Bay games thinking, where the hell is Aaron Jones? Like, he just wasn't on the field, right? It was Jamal Williams, a little bit A.J. Dillon. I do think Dillon will be involved. To say he's going to be a 1-for-1 replacement for Jamal Williams, I don't know about that, because Jamal Williams was pretty good in the receiving game. And they clearly trusted him on 3rd down. I can't see A.J. Dillon being like a 3rd down back. But Aaron Jones, man, I had to look it up as you were talking. So he'll be 27 this season. And I believe the way his contract is structured, Green Bay can get from underneath that after his 2nd season. So I think he's locked and loaded. I mean, this year, I mean, top 8 is where I have him for this upcoming season. And then if it were me, I would be trying to move him after this season. But I think you can confidently ride Aaron Jones as the guy. They just paid him. They are going to feed him in 2021. Aaron Rodgers' time is probably coming to an end soon. So I think he's extremely safe for 2021. As far as A.J. Dillon, I think he's one of the most valuable handcuffs in Dynasty, in fantasy football, period, right now. If something were to happen to Aaron Jones, there's absolutely nobody behind him left. So for a Dynasty perspective, I think this is the perfect time to try to acquire A.J. Dillon. His stock was sky high a few days ago, and now I don't know if it will ever be any lower than what it is right now.
Right.
And Aaron Jones, on the other hand, I think if you have him, you got to ride him this season, unless you've got an owner that's a fantasy manager that's willing to pay up for him. But I think he's locked and loaded as a top 8. I would not draft him in the top 8 of a Dynasty startup, but I believe he will return top 8 running back value this season in 2021.
Sure, yeah, and when this broke, my immediate thought with A.J. Dillon was he's now Alexander Mattison. Like, that's the way that we need to view A.J. Dillon in terms of, Dynasty and fantasy football. Was with Alexander Mattison, we have such a, we place such an importance on it. And yes, I get when he has gotten the opportunity, he hasn't produced the way that we've wanted. People have picked him up off waivers, and that hasn't gone well in previous years. But that sort of like handcuff, that insurance running back that you can look at in comparison to Aaron Jones, and it's the same way with Alexander Mattison and Dalvin Cook. Now, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers, and that's kind of the point that I wanted to talk about here with Aaron Jones before we move on, especially from a dynasty perspective. So Aaron Rodgers, if we both sit down here and we realistically assess the situation and we say probably another year, right? Like, this will probably be the last year in Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers. Are we in agreement there?
Yes, we are. Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is it for Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. This is the final hurrah.
Okay, so then looking at the next season after Aaron Rodgers, then you're going to go to Jordan Love. And I'm sorry, Jordan Love is not Aaron Rodgers. So what does that scare you at all about Aaron Jones? You said that you'd be looking to ship him off after this year. Like, that is a little concerning for me, where I actually might be like heading into next year, if we get to week 6, week 7, and I am no longer, like, my roster just can't compete, I might be looking to ship Aaron Jones off like right then and get ahead of it, because I don't know if his value is going to be as high when he's not attached to Aaron Rodgers, if that makes sense.
100%. But I would just say that there's no guarantee that Jordan Love will be the guy in 2022 if Aaron Rodgers is gone. And Aaron Jones, will be on year 2 of a 4-year deal. And if there is an inferior quarterback that comes in, we talk about that all the time. I mean, what's going to happen? Volume, opportunity. Aaron Jones is going to be the guy on that team. So I don't think you would be wrong for trying to get ahead of the curve if, you're a team that has Aaron Jones and you're not in contention to go ahead and move him towards the end of this season. But I do think you've got 2 probably really good years of Aaron Jones production before you really, really need to get out from under a 28 going on 29-year-old running back on a Aaron Rodgers-less team.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And if Jordan Love isn't the quarterback in 2022, Green Bay done messed up. So, yeah, man.
I think they've already messed up. I mean, honestly.
That's fair.
There's no reason that the whole selection of A.J. Dillon looks even more egregious now. Jordan Love in the first round, and then they go with the tight end fullback hybrid in the third, and only to find a Pro Bowl caliber tight end in Robert Tonyan.
Right.
I think they've already messed up, man. And I think, I'll just say this, Yates. I think the NFL is coming around to the notion of just cutting bait with a player, Josh Rosen. We see all these rumblings about Tua.
Right.
I think they're just like, you know what? The hell with it. It was a bad pick. Let's just move on and find someone else.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be not only the things that you mentioned about A.J. Dillon and Josiah DeGuara, like, they traded up for Jordan Love. Like, it's not that this quarterback just fell into their lap like it did with Aaron Rodgers. No, they traded up for this quarterback who you're not going to get, right? Anyway. So let's move on here. So let's look at the New Orleans Saints quarterback situation, which we do have a little bit of clarity on thanks to the breaking news here on the podcast. So Drew Brees officially announces his retirement, like, hats off, respect, like the gif of the little kid, like raising his Derek Jeter respect cap to Drew Brees and everything that he accomplished in his NFL career. I know that towards the end of his career, it wasn't as great as it was in the prime, right? And that's going to kind of cloud our memories of him. But man, this guy, everything that you would want in an NFL quarterback. So Hall of Fame through and through, stepping into the broadcasting booth is going to be a ton of fun next season. So now, looking forward, New Orleans has somehow miraculously gotten their way down towards the actually like competent salary cap management, and I just don't understand what sort of voodoo magic that they placed on the salary cap to get here, but they did. So Taysom Hill, and I love this headline. With everything within me, I love this headline. Signs a 4-year $140 million contract extension. However, essentially all of it is like voidable, and he'll never reach the 140 or anything close to it. It was just a cap management way to be able to get his salary cap hit for this season down. So Taysom Hill going to be on the roster next season. That's guaranteed. Now we have the news that Jameis Winston signed a 1-year deal for $12 million, or up to $12 million, it's sounding like, as more news comes out. And so now I think it's going to be an open quarterback competition. Let's just throw it to you. Let's get your thoughts. How do you see this quarterback situation playing out next season? And then we can dissect it from there.
I mean, it's going to be a quarterback battle. But if Jameis Winston can't beat out Taysom Hill for the starting job, that's just going to be bad.
Yeah.
Jameis Winston needs to win this job. He should win this job. He should be the front runner to win this job. But here's the thing, Yates. Even if Jameis is the starter, just like I know, just like everybody else knows, there are going to be stretches within games that Taysom Hill comes in and does the same thing he was doing, probably to an even higher degree than what he was doing with Drew Brees. It's just, I'm very, very, very nervous about this New Orleans Saints offense, man. But Jameis should win it. But what kind of leash is he going to be on? It's probably going to be the shortest of leashes.
Yeah, I think that I do expect Jameis to win out this quarterback battle, quarterback competition, however we're classifying it. And so I think that, again, like you mentioned, I do think that you're going to see Taysom Hill take away some quarterback reps. But I think the whole thing with Taysom and the whole allure for Sean Payton was the fact that Drew Brees, towards the end of his career, just could not push the ball downfield. So they needed a more creative way to attack defenses and keep defenses on their heels, and that was to bring in Taysom Hill. Now, if you follow the money and everything like this, it indicates that Taysom Hill is, of course, still going to be involved in this offense, but I think it won't be to the level that it was with Drew Brees because Jameis can push the ball deep downfield. He's actually very damn good at it. So I think moving forward, I do expect Jameis to be the starter. I do think that you are going to see, if he turns back into the Jameis that we saw in Tampa Bay, where he throws a couple of interceptions, I think, again, you mentioned it, a short leash. I think that is very realistic. We actually could see that happen, where you see, Taysom Hill step in and finish the rest of the game, and then the next game, Sean Payton says, "Oh, Jameis is our starter." It kind of like that Tua and Ryan Fitzpatrick situation, like from this past season. So I could see that happening, but from a dynasty perspective and value, Taysom Hill, you're not chasing whatsoever, correct?
No.
Like you're not going anywhere near him, right?
No.
Yeah, neither am I. Like I'm not going anywhere near Taysom Hill. Jameis, are you going and trying to acquire Jameis Winston in Dynasty? Are you selling him? Are you selling high? Like what's kind of your plan of attack here with Jameis Winston?
Yeah, I am of the QB camp where a leopard just very rarely changes its stripes. And Jameis Winston, for as great of I believe, 2018 fantasy season that he had, the reason why he's out of Tampa Bay is because he cannot protect the ball. And Bruce Arians didn't play that game. They're in a competitive division. I just don't believe that Sean Payton is going to give him the leeway. So, no, I'm not trying to acquire Jameis Winston, and absolutely I would be trying to move him if I had him for as much as I can. I don't believe in him long term. He's been turnover prone since Florida State, and that's the reason why he didn't have a job, and he's going to be fighting for a job now. And I think it's even a higher likelihood that Taysom Hill takes over and starts midway through the season or replaces him. Like he can't protect the ball. He cannot protect the ball, and that's a big time problem.
Yeah, I think with Jameis, the longer the leash is, the more confident that I would be, right? Like with Tampa, it was the whole situation. Well, you're not going to turn to whoever their backup was at that point. I don't even remember who it was. It might have been Blaine Gabbert. I don't remember. So, you're not going to turn to the backup. So it was just let Jameis continue to do his thing because you don't have a better alternative. Well, we can sit here and we can nitpick and say, is Taysom Hill actually a better alternative? But Sean Payton seems to believe so. So, yeah, I do think that he does have a short leash heading into 2021. I do think that he's going to get the first crack at it. Yeah. We'll see how he does, if he improves at all. But, if you can turn him and you can flip him for max value, then I'm perfectly fine with that. Now, what does this do for Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara specifically? Because the rest of this wide receiver core is just a complete mystery. Like, is it going to be, it's Adam Troutman, but he hasn't done anything for us to really consider him into this equation. So specifically, Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, what does our prediction here on Jameis Winston being the quote-unquote starter, what does that do for them?
I want to say good for like Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, whoever's catching the ball, because Jameis is fearless. He will push the ball downfield. If they draft a wide receiver and Jameis is the starter, then I think good for them. Taysom, he was okay with Michael Thomas. I don't really remember Alvin Kamara getting involved much, but, and again, that's the problem with Taysom Hill. It's easy to say, oh, just check down, but his first inclination when the number one option isn't there is to run the ball. So
run, right.
And you talk about follow the money, like New Orleans isn't committed to any of these guys, like one-year deals. And Taysom Hill's contract, I mean, they can really get out of it. I think this is going to be more problematic than people think, and I am nervous about Kamara in his prime. I'm nervous about a 28-year-old, 27-year-old Michael Thomas. Yates, I'd be trying to, I don't know, man. This one, I don't know how I feel about any of those guys right now.
Yeah, I think if Jameis is the guy, then it gives me at least a more confidence in Michael Thomas, right? Because at that point, you're putting a capable and competent quarterback with arm talent, right? Like that can't forget how talented of a thrower Jameis is. It was just the interceptions that kind of clouds that. So I do think that that's a bump up for Michael Thomas. And again, it can't get much worse than what it was last year with 0 touchdowns. So I think optimism, right? Like I'll phrase that. I have optimism with Michael Thomas. Now I don't think that you can sell him high. I don't think that you can necessarily buy him low because of his name value. So he's just kind of a hold. He's just there. With Alvin Kamara, the concern is with Jameis being willing to throw it downfield, then, okay, what does that mean for the check down possibilities? It's the inverse of Taysom Hill, right? Where you mentioned if that option isn't there, that first read or whatever, then he's not going to look for his check down. He's just going to tuck it and run. So yeah. I guess I'm a little bit concerned there with Alvin Kamara too, but with Emmanuel Sanders being released, Adam Troutman being unproven, like I just don't know who the other receiving options on this team are. So I think you could see ridiculous target volume for both Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. Now, of course, we'll see who they add through the draft and if they can add anyone else in free agency. Of course, we'll break that down as we move forward. But hopefully that just kind of gives people just an idea of where we're at with the overall New Orleans Saints situation. It is a mystery. Like we really don't know. We need more pieces to the puzzle, and hopefully throughout the draft we'll get that. All right, let's move on to the deals that happened earlier today. So Jonnu Smith, we'll start here, and we'll just break down the Patriots in general because, holy crap, very, very active day here. So Jonnu Smith signs with the Patriots on a 4-year deal. 4 years, $50 million. He is now the third highest paid tight end in the NFL on an average per year, only behind George Kittle and Travis Kelce. And then Nelson Agholor, of course, with the Las Vegas Raiders last year, previously with the Philadelphia Eagles, signs with the Patriots for a 2-year, $26 million deal. Kendrick Bourne also signs with the New England Patriots on a 3-year deal. 3 years, $22.5 million. Of course, Kendrick Bourne in San Francisco for the past several seasons. So let's just break this down now with each of these guys, and we'll enter into the conversation with me asking you this, Ray. Who leads the New England Patriots in targets in 2021?
Jonnu Smith. Right now. Right now.
I kind of tend to agree with you because, like, with Cam Newton, if that is who we're projecting to be the starter, of course, the draft could change that. But, I mean, if you take into account, like, Cam Newton and Nelson Agholor's skill set, like, not really a huge mesh. Like, Nelson Agholor being, that deep threat, that's not really Cam's game. He's more of an underneath thrower. And then Kendrick Bourne, like, he could be a chain mover. But what's the real upgrade over there over Damiere Byrd, right? Or Jacoby Myers with Kendrick Bourne? Like, I think he's more talented than the two of them, but yet it's not significant where it's going to change, the fantasy impact, or he's going to demand a ton of targets per game. I think that Jonnu can absolutely lead this team, again, right now, with the pieces that we have of this puzzle, in targets in 2021. So break it down from a dynasty perspective on Jonnu. Did this landing spot move the needle for you at all with Jonnu? Did he move up in your rankings? Where are you at with a dynasty outlook here with Jonnu Smith getting a ton of money?
So check it out real quick. During Cam Newton's prime with Greg Olson, here were Greg Olson's targets from 2012 to 2016. 104 targets, 111 targets, 123 targets, 124 targets, 129 targets. He went for over 1,000 yards 3 straight seasons. I mean, if this were 5 years ago, I'd be really, really bullish on Jonnu Smith's outlook. For me personally, it did not move the needle much for me at all. I just don't think Cam Newton is I don't think he's that good anymore. If he's going to see the targets, great. Are they going to be accurate? Probably not. They paid him a lot of money, so I'm sure they're going to try to scheme him the ball in multiple ways. I really want to see what New England does in the draft. I think they go one or two directions. I think they're either going to draft a quarterback or they're going to take a wide receiver. If they bring in one of these talented rookie wide receivers, I think Jonnu may have, some competition. But what are the quality of targets going to look like from Cam Newton this season? It's hard for me. If he moved up, it was just a tad bit. I still want Kyle Pitts over him. I still want Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson and Mark Andrews. he moved up a little bit for me, but it didn't move the needle that much. Really just was uninspired by the signing, to be honest.
Yeah, I think this wasn't his best landing spot, right? Like his most ideal landing spot. And I laid out, that for me, that was the New York Jets with Michael LaFleur as the offensive coordinator there, coming over from San Francisco, make him the George Kittle of that offense. It didn't work, right? Like he's now in New England. So I think that would have been the most ideal from a fantasy perspective. But yet I don't think that this is going to be enough where I bump him outside my top 10. Like looking at my Twitter timeline, there are people that are just completely out on Jonnu Smith for some reason because he signed in New England. Now, I get that the concerns of Cam Newton. I really, really do. But when you take a look at Mark Andrews finished as the tight end 5 last year in weeks 1 through 15, of course. And if you're looking at what Mark Andrews did, he finished as the tight end 5 with 58 receptions, 701 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I believe those are the numbers off the top of my head. I tweeted this out earlier. That is absolutely feasible for Jonnu Smith in 2021. Like, that is not a ridiculous stat line. And I get Mark Andrews missed a couple games, and of course, the injury concerns play a role in that. But yet, I don't think that Jonnu was ever going to be someone that we looked at as a top 3 option, no matter the landing spot. But yet, based on the tight end position, I think that we absolutely have to talk about him as a potential top 5 option, just based on the fact that you follow the money, that he got paid. Bill Belichick has raved about him previously, calling him one of the best tight ends in the NFL. And we now see that he actually backs that up, and he backs that opinion up by paying him a ton of money. And so I think that you're going to see Jonnu be schemed into this offense, and it's not going to take a ton for him to create yardage, right? You give him those underneath catches, get him those angle routes out of the backfield. That was something that we saw him utilize a ton at Tennessee. Like, just get him the ball in creative ways and let him create after the catch. So I think that no matter what our opinion is on Cam Newton, and yes, I'm not here to call Cam Newton a fantastic passer by any stretch of the imagination, but yet he can be competent enough where Jonnu can sustain fantasy value. And it doesn't take much to push you into the top 10 at the tight end position, let alone the top 5. And then take into account, dynasty-wise, long-term, what happens if Cam Newton doesn't play that well this year? Okay, they move on from Cam Newton next year. Well, Jonnu's tied to this team now for the next 4 years, assuming that they don't cut him early, right? So, or as all his guaranteed money runs out or anything like that. So he's tied to this offense for the next 4 years. If everything goes correctly, what happens if they upgrade the quarterback position and they get another quarterback next season, or they get a quarterback in the draft? So I am trying, again, I was all in with Jonnu before, everyone knows that, but I'm trying to acquire him everywhere I can. If I've got those managers in my league that are a little bit concerned and not as happy with this landing spot, because I think that it's actually pretty good, all things considered.
Okay, I'm listening and I am open, Kyle. I am open. And I think you make some very valid points. Maybe I was a little too harsh on Jonnu. He's definitely inside my top 10.
So let me put this into perspective too. Like, I had him at tight end 11 in Dynasty. I moved him up to tight end 8. Okay, so I'm not saying that he is above the guys that you mentioned, but T.J. Hawkinson, Noah Fant. I have those guys at 5 and 6 respectively. So I'm still measured in my support for Jonnu. I'm not bumping him up a crazy amount. He moved a little bit, but not a ton.
Yeah, I think tight end 8's fair. Like, as I was going through them in my head, I've got him around 8 or 9, honestly, and I think that's totally fair. He's definitely inside my top 10. Got him around like 8 or 9, so I like it. And if we're following the money, he's more secure than a guy like Robert Tonyan. You know what I mean? He's more secure than that tight end right there. So. Yeah, I like that. I think that's fair.
All right, that's enough Jonnu talk for one episode. Of course, I'm sure that we'll talk about Jonnu Smith the next episode because, hello, I'm your host. Okay, so let's look at the other 2 signings for New England. Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, do they do anything for you from a dynasty perspective? Are you looking at these guys at all?
Super depth. They are throw-ins and deals, like just depth pieces. Nobody that you're ever going to feel comfortable starting. Totally just depth pieces late in your dynasty startup, where if you have them, if everything just goes bad and you have to start one of them, then you do it with zero confidence.
Yeah, I think with Nelson Aguilar, there was some reason to be optimistic heading into free agency where, I threw out, can't remember if it was on our free agency predictions or the main podcast, and I said, potentially Los Angeles, the Chargers, slide him into that Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson role that we saw, succeed, and let him be that field stretcher for Justin Herbert. At that point, I have a much different view on Nelson Aguilar from a dynasty perspective than I do with pairing him up with Cam Newton. It is different when you're talking about the receiver who is that field stretching option for Cam Newton. That's just not a guy that I'm really willing to invest in. So as a depth piece, I'm fine having him where I'll plug him in if I'm desperate. I mean, we had that with Jacoby Myers and Damiere Byrd last season, but outside of that, I'm not looking their way. All right. Anything else to say with New England before we move on?
No, just kind of weird signings,
they are.
They're just
a lot of money.
It's a lot of money for players that aren't really proven, and I'm interested to see what they do in the draft, because with these two wide receivers, with Jonnu Smith, there's still Myers and Harry. What happens to Devonte Smith if he's drafted there, or what does Mac Jones really have to work with? And I believe they sent away one of their offensive linemen. So I don't know, just a weird free agent class for a team that's probably at least, third best in the division right now. Buffalo clearly, right. And then Miami, just weird. Yeah,
super weird. But, we'll see. They're putting the pieces to the puzzle together. We'll see how it all pans out at the end of free agency and the draft, of course, and we'll be there to analyze that and break it down. All right, let's talking about a New England Patriots lineman that left in free agency. Joe Thuney, offensive lineman, left guard, signs a 5-year, $80 million with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I want to talk about an offensive lineman here, not because they're fantasy relevant, but yet because what does this do for one Patrick Mahomes who desperately needed help? Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz, both of their offensive tackles, cut this past week. So now, they needed help on the interior of the offensive line to begin with. So what does it do for Patrick Mahomes? Does it move the needle at all for you? Is he still cemented at QB1? Or do you still have concerns, right? And then also, does this do anything for you for CEH?
Yeah. This is a hell of a signing. You protect your quarterback who's been battered. You just watched him get punished by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so you signed one of the best, free agent offensive guards in the class. I'm pretty sure they're going to try to do more on the offensive line in free agency and in the NFL draft to secure Mahomes, their $500 million quarterback, right? And
right.
I think this is good for Mahomes. This is good for Kelsey. It's good for Hill, and it's good for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think they were exposed to a certain degree in the Super Bowl, and they are making the proper adjustments. And I'm pretty sure if they can go back to 2020, they'd probably take an offensive lineman at 32
right.
opposed to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So you love to see. These are the signings in free agency that, as a fantasy gamer, you love to see. You love to see these signings. You love to see the offensive linemen for the Ravens get picked up today. That helps out Dobbins and Edwards and Lamar Jackson.
Right.
So this is a great move by Kansas City. They needed it. It was a need, and he's a very talented player. I saw some stat where he had over 1,100 something snaps and only gave up 3 sacks. So yeah, you need this player.
For sure. So Joe Thuney going to Kansas City, and you talked about moves that we love to see from a fantasy perspective that aren't necessarily the wide receiver or the running back or whatever. Let's talk about Corey Lindsley, the center for the Green Bay Packers, former center for the Green Bay Packers, now heads to the Los Angeles Chargers. And the Chargers, moving on from Trey Turner, they really only had one essentially capable offensive lineman with Brian Bulaga. So now Justin Herbert, that was the big concern, was give him some support, give him some protection. They did just that in a big way. Corey Lindsley signing a 5-year, $62.5 million deal. So again, same question here. Does it do anything for you from a fantasy perspective? Are you moving guys based on this, or is this just really just kind of saying okay, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing with protecting your star quarterback?
Yeah, I don't think you can really move anybody unless they sign 4 offensive linemen, right? 4 all-pro offensive linemen. But this should give you comfort having, Justin Herbert on your dynasty teams, on your fantasy rosters, that they got a young offensive lineman. I know he's 29 years old, going on 30, but NFL-wise, it's still, right in the prime of his career. You lock up your center of the next 4, 5, 6 years with Justin Herbert. This is a good start. This is how you build, an offense inside out. So I think this is another one of those underrated moves where I'm not moving Herbert up a slot or dropping him down a slot, but they needed help up front. They got one of the best centers, one of the best offensive linemen in the free agent class. Good move for the Los Angeles Chargers and good move for Justin Herbert. Sure, he's happy.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see if they continue to add to that offensive line, and I'm sure Russell Wilson is watching somewhere, just pissed off.
Oh boy,
just seeing these signings. I'm sure Russell Wilson's pretty upset. Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback for the 49ers, agrees to a 5-year deal, so there's some news for you all playing in 2 fullback leagues. Philip Dorsett reportedly headed to Jacksonville on a new deal. Philip Dorsett at this point, nothing. No, thank you.
No.
I'm just mentioning it because I think it does push Chris Conley and Keelan Cole out the door, so we'll wait and see where they end up. But Philip Dorsett, who knew that Philip Dorsett was going to be a day 1 free agent signing?
I didn't even know he was still in the league, and I'm not.
I didn't either.
I didn't know he was still in the league.
Either.
Yeah,
I had no idea. I manage like this huge depth chart spreadsheet that I've got on my own, and I've got my formulas and stuff. It's kind of nerdy, but so I've got all that, and I went to find the former team that Philip Dorsett played for, so that way I could copy him over to Jacksonville. And I was like, Indy? Was he on Indy? Like, I don't remember. Was he Seattle? I don't remember. Yeah. And so, he's apparently back, though, and he's in Jacksonville next season. Yeah. Rob Gronkowski agrees to re-sign with the Bucs on a 1-year, $10 million deal. I don't know where all this money's coming from, but they've got the gang back together. Rob Gronkowski back in town next year. So, for next year, I think he's going to do this like 1-year deal, just as long as Tom's still playing and as long as his body still holds up. So Gronk, I'll just put this to you. Gronk will finish as the tight end, in 2021?
8.
That's literally the number that I had in mind.
Yeah.
We did it.
Yes.
We did it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, let's go back to Jacksonville. Carlos Hyde reportedly agrees to a 2-year deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we talked about with James Robinson that, okay, we expect them to bring someone in. And you had a really interesting tweet before we started recording that I want to talk about. And let's talk about James Robinson and let's spend some time here. So, yeah I think the extent of the tweet was like, this is either really good for James Robinson or it's really bad. So break it down. What does this do for James Robinson in your perspective?
I mean, this is great. The replies are just hilarious. I mean, it was pure sarcasm, right? It was pure sarcasm. Of course, this is a fantastic move for James Robinson. I mean, the joke is, Carlos Hyde always seems to vulture work wherever he goes, right? No matter where Carlos Hyde goes, he finds some way to get involved. But I think this is telling. We continue to hear the Jacksonville coaches talk about wanting to build. Urban Meyer himself saying they want to build around James Robinson and bringing in a Carlos Hyde. Again, we talked about this on the last show. They were never going to go into the season with Raquel Armstead, Chris Thompson, and Devine Exigbo. It wasn't going to happen. I still don't think that precludes them from taking a running back in the 2021 NFL draft. However, I don't believe we're definitely not going to see it on day 1. Probably not day 2. So now you're talking about a day 3 running back and probably a more complementary piece to what the bangers that Carlos Hyde and James Robinson are. Listen, I know people want to continue to fade him because he was an undrafted free agent, but he just continues to defy the odds, and he looked fantastic last season on a bad Jacksonville team. They're going to be upgraded at the quarterback position, at the wide receiver position, maybe at tight end. I think this is outstanding for James Robinson, and if you have him, you should just be extremely excited about this.
Yeah, with Carlos Hyde, it's interesting because he's reuniting with Urban Meyer from his days at Ohio State, and Trent Baalke, who's the GM now, was the one who he was with in San Francisco. So I think more than anything, this is the two of those guys saying, we want someone that we know. James Robinson, we don't know him yet, right, as far as what he does. We didn't coach him last year. Let's get the guy that we know, that we can rely on if this doesn't work out. I think that Carlos Hyde might see 2 to 3 carries per game. That's it. Like, James Robinson is still going to be the main guy. And yes, I do think that I could see them adding a Michael Carter, Kenneth Gainwell in the draft as that like receiving option, kind of complementary piece. But it's not going to be now that they've added in Carlos Hyde. I'm not seeing them going after a James Conner or a Najee Harris in the first round or whatever. Like, it's going to be these two and then potentially a change of pace / third down receiving back added to this offense next year. So with the upgrades that we are seeing coming, right, as far as Trevor Lawrence, and they're going to add some wide receivers and a tight end and stuff like this, I think it's good news for James Robinson heading into next year.
So where, just off the top, Yates, where do you have him ranked amongst Dynasty running backs? Would you like him over some of these 2021 guys? I mean, I believe he was, a top 7 running back last season in PPR? I mean, where are you with James Robinson, and what would your advice be to managers out there either thinking about acquiring him or selling him?
Yeah, so it's definitely going to depend on who else they add, right? So I'm going to bump him up slightly. I had him at 20. I'm going to move him up to 18, like in that range, okay, as far as dynasty running backs. And then I got to see who else they add. If they bring in a Kenneth Gainwell, who I love, if they bring in Gainwell, if they bring in a Michael Carter as that like receiving weapon who is going to take touches away, because that was part of the allure of James Robinson too, was that he was getting the receiving work. He brought that safe floor for you, not only just with the work that he was getting on the ground, but then also his work through the air. So do they add in a running back, or do they wait until the 5th round and they add in, this lower tier receiving back who's just going to kind of fill out the depth chart behind? I got to wait. I could easily see James Robinson moving up, honestly, into my top 12. Above a guy like DeAndre Swift. I absolutely could see it, because Swift's situation is gross moving forward, and then James Robinson, his situation is about to improve. He might not see the overall workload that he had in previous seasons, but yet the scoring opportunities are going to increase because of the offensive upgrade. So I got to wait to see before I move him up completely, but he did move up a couple of spots, because this signifies to me that they're not bringing in any significant competition. It was always just, I had him at 20 because it was a wait and see. Like, I just don't know what Jacksonville's going to do, so I had to hold him there.
Okay.
Where do you have him? I'm assuming you're more bullish on James Robinson.
Yeah, I have him. I've got him at RB12 in Dynasty. I mean, he's young. We just saw the production. He's much in. I know the most recent example of undrafted free agent flaming out was Philip Lindsay. Philip Lindsay is 5'8", 185 pounds, 190 pounds.
Different players.
Different players. I'm very bullish on James Robinson, and it took me a while to roll around to it, but they've got him on a cheap deal. I think they're going to ride him for the next couple of seasons, and if he continues to produce, he'll continue to get opportunities. So I'm very, very bullish on James Robinson.
Yeah, and again, I mentioned it. I'm not opposed to moving him up there, but I'm gonna wait just a little bit to see who else they add, because I do think that someone else is going to be added to this depth chart. I just don't know who or at what draft capital or anything like that. But wait and see approach there. Okay, let's go. Corey Davis, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans, is now a wide receiver for the New York Jets, signing a 3-year, $37.5 million deal. So break it down from a dynasty perspective here. Corey Davis heading to New York. It's going to be Davis. It's going to be Denzel Mims. It's going to be potentially Jamison Crowder. We talked about that on a previous episode, that he could be a cap casualty. So Corey Davis heading into next year, does the quarterback really, really affect it here for you? Or are you just saying, like, the targets have to go somewhere? He's going to be the presumed wide receiver 1. What are your thoughts here with Corey Davis?
I saw somebody tweet out a tweet that pretty much was like, let's salute Corey Davis for his service for taking a grenade for the rest of the wide receivers in the free agent class. I don't know, Yates. This one, if Deshaun Watson somehow ends up with the Jets, then it's great for Davis, it's great for Mims, it's great for everybody. If this situation plays out as all NFL mock draft analysts are saying, or the talking heads saying that Zach Wilson's going to be the quarterback, and the targets have to go somewhere. Sure, this just screams an offense where like 3 guys are going to have 50-something receptions for like 600, 700 yards.
Right.
It just screams nobody standing out as the dominant number 1 go-to guy. I know follow the money, but this was like worst case scenario. I was pretty excited about a Corey Davis landing spot. I really was. And this just, for me, is I don't want to go out and acquire him. And I know I can't trade him for what I thought I may be able to. So I'm just kind of stuck holding Corey Davis and hoping that he's the one who ends up with 72 receptions for 912 yards. Like, that's what I'm hoping for.
Right. I think that it's going to depend as far as how far he can climb or his like overall outlook. I think it's going to depend on what they do with Jamison Crowder. If they hold on to Jamison Crowder and they hold on to Sam Darnold, then Jamison Crowder and Darnold, right, they just lock onto one another when they're on the field, right? Darnold just features him heavily. So I think that's going to affect Corey Davis and his overall. But if Crowder is cut and they bring in, I mean, let's just say they move forward with, Braxton Berrios next year, or they bring in like an Elijah Moore in the second or third round of the NFL draft, like to be their slot receiver, then at that point, I think Corey Davis will be the wide receiver one as far as target totals in this offense. But this is going to be the Kyle Shanahan offense. This is going to be a run-heavy offense, and I just don't know about the overall target totals there. So I do think that Davis will be the wide receiver one when it's all said and done. But yeah, I just don't know what exactly that's going to equate to. So I did bump him up slightly. I had him at wide receiver 38. In my Dynasty rankings, I moved him up to wide receiver 33. So I moved him up slightly, but I'm not going crazy here, right? Like or I'm not going to go too far in the other direction where I just am completely out. I think as a wide receiver 3 in Dynasty, Corey Davis is perfectly fine.
So Yates, can I ask you this question? And we talked about 2 players who have moved away from the Tennessee Titans. I just want to throw it out there to you. A.J. Brown. What does this do for A.J. Brown, and what does this do for Derrick Henry?
Oh, man. I mean, Field Yates put out on Twitter just a little bit ago, he's like 200 target season incoming for A.J. Brown. And if they aren't able to add anyone else of note, which I don't see happening, then yeah, A.J. Brown is finally going to get the target totals that he deserves. I think, 10-plus targets per game if they add in some lower level, lower tier wide receivers, because again, they barely have anyone on this depth chart. So they've got to add someone. And I think this is kind of, it's not wheels up just yet because it's an incomplete puzzle. I keep saying that. Like, this is really what the offseason is. It's just one large puzzle and we're trying to put it together. So I think it's incomplete yet. But if they do add in I'm having trouble figuring out a wide receiver off the top of my head.
Who are they even, who do they bring in?
Because it has to fit their scheme. It has to fit someone who's a big physical presence that can, help as far as rack, who can, maybe they look at a Terrace Marshall in the draft. They look at someone like that who's a big physical presence. I don't think Rashad Bateman's going to be there for them, but he doesn't really fit what they want to do. So I guess I don't know. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
So I think, but if they do add in those lower tier wide receivers, those just kind of replacement guys, then A.J. Brown, I mean, wide receiver, probably top 3 in Dynasty. I'm not even kidding.
Any, I know it sounds gross, any late into your Dynasty startup draft appeal, and Anthony Ferkser, the tight end, who actually played all right. The past couple of years.
He did.
But, any, sleeper, maybe tight end 16 could be, just a bench stash that can fill in for you in Ferkser?
I would be interested, but he's also a free agent himself.
Oh,
so
goodness.
They haven't brought him back yet. So it's like, okay, well, who's going to be the tight end there in Tennessee? Because the last that I heard was that they were working towards bringing Michael Pruitt back. That was going to be their, the guy that they were going to bring back. So I don't know what's going to happen with Ferkser. Did he show enough, that he's going to get, a contract somewhere else? Like, Tennessee just spent big with Bud Dupree on the edge. They spent Danico Autry on the interior of the defensive line. So they're allocating significant money to the defense now. This offense is looking rough heading into next season. So, again, I want to wait and see, but right now, if Ferkser is the only guy and they re-sign him, then absolutely, because I think that he can step in and he can fill that role that Jonnu had. Even just maintain the role that he had, he'd be a fine depth piece for me. But outside of that, I just don't know what Tennessee's going to do on the offensive side of the ball yet.
Derrick Henry's going to go back-to-back 2,000 rushing yards. They are going to pound him.
Yep.
And just, this is a Dynasty show. I love Derrick Henry. This may be as good as it gets as a time to move him. I mean, this might be it. And you trade him based on there's nobody else there. He's going to get the volume. He's not yet 28 years old, but if they pound him, this season, it's human. Your body can only take so much. Now, I know he's a tank, but this may be as good as it gets to trade Derrick Henry if you have him.
The other one that I'll mention here with Tennessee, and then I want to double back to New York, is Darrington Evans, running back out of App State, heading into his second year. So last year, he was drafted at, what did they spend, a third or fourth round pick on him to be that like change of pace, to fill that Dion Lewis role that they had in this offense for so long. So I think that if you do have some vacated targets, which you obviously do now with Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith, and depending on who else they bring in, then Darrington Evans could be a beneficiary, right? He could be someone that they give some targets to out of the backfield, which is uncharacteristic of this offense, but I think that's been just more of a product of they didn't have to. Whereas if they head into next season and it truly is just A.J. Brown and no one else of note, then Darrington Evans could be the guy that I'm looking to acquire right now in Dynasty that could give me a solid depth piece, right? A solid depth piece on my Dynasty roster, but then has the potential because he's a talented player. Like, I liked his tape, so he can fill that role pretty well. With New York, the Jets, really quick, what does Corey Davis signing do for Denzel Mims, right? We had talked about under-the-radar Dynasty buys, and we had talked about buy Denzel Mims. Well, now Corey Davis's presence here in New York changes it a little bit for me. I'm not as optimistic. I'm also not super crazy on Denzel Mims because of the scheme. It's a weird fit where you look at what Kyle Shanahan has deployed, where it's Deebo Samuel, it's Brandon Ayuk. That's not Denzel Mims. Mims is a contested catch guy, go up and high point the football, play above the rim. So I guess, what does it do for Mims? Are you as optimistic as you were back when we had that conversation, or are you kind of cooling now?
No, because when we had that conversation, we really assumed that he was going to have an opportunity to step forward and be the one. And you're absolutely right. I do believe that Corey Davis is going to be the presumed number one wide receiver there. So I'm not as bullish on Denzel Mims. If I can get him at a discount, I would still bet on that. He's very talented. He's young. He's a second-round pick. But it definitely tempers those expectations that I think a lot of people had for Mims, a while ago, when at first we thought it was going to be Trevor Lawrence, and now it's not even Justin Fields, it's Zach Wilson, and now there's Corey Davis in the picture, and who knows what else they do. So, yeah, not nearly as excited about Denzel Mims.
I'm right there with you. All right, last piece of news, which is Devonte Booker signs with the New York Giants. Running back that had been with Las Vegas this past season, a 2-year, $6 million deal. Just there as a, to fill that, again, Dion Lewis role that has been in New York. I don't think that he's going to see any significant work with Saquon Barkley back healthy next season. Do you have a different opinion, or
no? But you know what kind of, and I know, again, this sounds gross, but it's Dynasty. We're mining for players who can get a chance, right? I thought Wayne Gallman looked okay last season in relief of.
I did too.
Well, actually, he looked really good in relief of Saquon Barkley. I don't know what Wayne Gallman's. I don't know if he's a free agent. I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming Gallman is not back in New York. So I would just monitor. What we do, Yates. We try to help. Dynasty gamers find these players who may have value. Like just telling people to go draft Patrick Mahomes doesn't help anybody. Of course you draft Patrick Mahomes, but little under the radar things that we're kind of talking about, like you saying that Ferkser, is free agent. Follow that. I think you follow Wayne Gallman. He's not going to go anywhere to be a starter, but I think he's a competent backup that's still relatively young, that played well last year. And if he lands on a team, just say hypothetically he goes to the Arizona Cardinals, right? Where, Drake, Chase Edmonds have remained healthy, and, you might have a starting running back on your hand if there's an injury. So just follow Wayne Gallman. That's what, when I saw this happen, I said, okay, Gallman's gone. So where's he land? And those are the small little things that I'm going to follow, because Gallman is a player you can get, a 2021 fourth rounder for Wayne Gallman, a throw-in?
Dirt cheap.
Dirt cheap. So just that's what this Devonte Booker signing kind of highlighted for me, is follow where Wayne Gallman goes.
Yeah, Wayne Gallman, Alfred Morris, and Dion Lewis are all free agents.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I think it's a great call following Wayne Gallman, because, again, he did did show out last season. He showed me that he can handle a workload if he gets it. So it all depends on where he lands, of course. But yeah, that's a great call. Okay. Anything else from a free agent perspective, Ray? I think we covered all of our bases. We'll be back later on this week, of course, to kind of just catch everything else that we didn't get. But anything else before we get out of here?
Well, I think we've got a lot to talk about later this week because some of the big names have still yet to sign. I've been scouring the Twitter while we were recording to see if any of the wide receivers, any breaking news there, and looks like we're going to head into the evening without some of those top guys unsigned. If you want to kind of hit on a couple of those top guys we're still waiting on, and I guess by the time this comes out, they may have signed.
Yeah, I mean, you still got Kenny Golladay to sign, Will Fuller, Juju Smith-Schuster. There's still some top-tier names there
Curtis
at the wide receiver position. Curtis Samuel, we haven't heard on Kenyon Drake at the running back position. So there are some guys that we'll of course break down from a dynasty perspective when we get that news. Again, we'll be back later on this week. So we didn't get to the other segment that I was kind of teasing there. We might get to that on Thursday, maybe. If not, we'll come back to it next week. We'll see. All right, man. Just as a reminder, you can find Ray on Twitter at RayGQ. That's QUE. I can be found on Twitter as well at Kyle Y NFL. Thank you to everyone who has been a supporter of the show for the first few episodes here. We greatly appreciate it. Check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/FantasyPros, and also head over and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We would greatly appreciate it. All right, that's all for today. I'm for Ray Garvin. I'm Kyle Yates, and we'll see you next time. Looking for useful content, fantasy relevant information, and the data that can help your team win? Then make sure to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. And while you're at it, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Fantasy Pros so we can help you dominate your league all season long.